In Family Guy, Peter Griffin's crazy ideas often get him into serious trouble, putting his life at risk. Whether it's dangerous stunts or outrageous plans, his impulsive nature and lack of foresight often lead to near-death experiences. Peter's obsession with being the center of attention takes a dangerous turn when he deliberately tries to get sick. His stunts quickly spiral out of control, landing him in the hospital with a critical condition.
I even won a deep voice contest with Joe yesterday.
Peter boasts to Lois about winning a deep voice contest against Joe the day before. His comment reflects his usual need to draw attention to himself, even in trivial situations. Peter feels overly proud of winning a deep voice contest against Joe, which adds a funny touch to the moment. His excitement over something so small highlights how much he craves attention, often leading to ridiculous behavior. This ties back to how his constant need for validation causes problems in the episode.
Peter, what happened to your voice?
Oh, you know what happened, you sexy minx. My white blood cells attacked the pathogens and created antibodies, and then the pathogens were filtered out by my kidneys into my urine and then expelled from my body, you slut.
Peter's response about his voice is filled with ridiculous over-explaining, turning a basic question into a dramatic science lesson. His outburst shows how overconfident he becomes in situations, even when he's clueless. His behavior reflects his constant need to appear knowledgeable, even when it doesn't make sense. This moment is another example of Peter's over-the-top behavior, of how his misguided ideas escalate into situations that almost harm him.
But boy, that sick voice of yours was hot.
Lois's comment about Peter's sick voice being attractive serves as a subtle and humorous trigger for his growing obsession with gaining attention. Her playful remarks feed Peter's ego, making him believe that being unwell could somehow make him more desirable or interesting. This fuels his desire to exaggerate his symptoms and keep the attention focused on him, pushing him to make increasingly reckless choices. This idea quickly gets out of hand, putting Peter's health in serious danger and showing how his need for attention often ends up causing him more trouble than it's worth.
I gotta make myself sick again and get that voice back.
Peter's fixation on regaining his sick voice shows how far he'll go for attention, even if it means risking his health. He shares his reckless plan with Brian, who immediately points out how terrible the idea is, but Peter seems determined to ignore common sense. This moment highlights his tendency to chase validation in dangerous ways, setting himself up for more trouble than he can handle.
Okay, go ahead and spit.
It's okay, go ahead.
Peter's desperation to regain his sick voice takes a bizarre turn when he visits a dentist and asks the most shocking favor imaginable. While the dentist advises his patient to spit during a routine procedure, Peter takes it to a disgusting level, requesting the dentist to spit directly into his mouth. This moment showcases how far Peter is willing to go for attention, disregarding all boundaries and common decency. And it hilariously highlights his unending pursuit of the spotlight at the expense of his health and dignity.
All right, Chris, I figured out a great way to get sick. I'm gonna be a woman at work who cannot get sick right now.
Peter's obsession with getting sick leads him to come up with a ridiculous new plan. He pretends to embody the desperation of a busy woman who can't afford to fall ill, deciding to go to extremes to achieve his goal. In a foolish attempt, he licks Lindsay Lohan's dessert fork, believing it will make him sick, and even asks a waiter for cocaine, showing how outrageous and reckless his actions become in his pursuit of attention and a sexy voice.
Do I sound sexy? Tell me I sound sexy!
Peter's desperate need to sound more appealing leads him to take dangerous risks. When he comes back from the dentist, he's barely holding himself together, but still insists on knowing if he sounds attractive. His obsession blinds him to how bad his condition really is. Pushing himself too far, his body finally gives up, and he collapses after vomiting, ending up in the hospital. This incident demonstrates Peter's pattern of pushing dangerous ideas too far, risking his life for superficial and unnecessary reasons. Peter's careless idea to dig up Native American remains in his backyard sets off a chain of terrifying supernatural events. His reckless actions bring a dangerous curse upon his family, and Peter himself faces life-threatening consequences as chaos unfolds around him.
Freaking Joe with his home theater has to top everything I do. Well, tomorrow I'm gonna go to that Home Supply and I'm gonna build an entire multiplex.
After coming back from Joe's house, Peter feels jealous of Joe's impressive home theater. He decides to outdo him by planning something even bigger, a full movie multiplex at his own house. This shows how Peter's need to compete leads him to come up with the wild ideas to prove he's the better man, but he often creates unnecessary chaos and puts him in trouble. Peter's jealousy often leads to over-the-top decisions, and this time, it starts with him visiting Joe's house and seeing his impressive home theater. What begins as a simple plan to impress quickly spirals into one of Peter's outrageous ideas that put him and his family in danger. His desire to compete not only creates chaos, but also sets the stage for the supernatural events that nearly cost him his life.
Hey, look what I found!
Peter's habit of turning even the simplest situations into chaos takes center stage when he eagerly shows Brian what he unearthed in the backyard. He reveals a Native American skull with pride, paying no attention to the creepy feeling or the consequences of disturbing such ancient remains. His excitement quickly spirals into trouble as spooky things start happening around the house. What begins as a funny moment of curiosity turns into yet another example of how Peter's wild and impulsive ideas always lead to disaster.
Wow, authentic Native American remains. Peter, I'd put that back if I were you. You may be disturbing a sacred burial site.
Peter's wild curiosity gets him into serious trouble again when he finds what he thinks is a cool discovery in his backyard. He proudly shows Brian a Native American skull he unearthed, but Brian quickly warns him that he might have just disturbed a sacred burial site. Instead of taking Brian's advice, Peter, I really think you should put that back where you found it. Peter ignores the potential danger and gets even more excited about his find. Peter's careless decision to dig up the Native American skull leads to a series of scary and dangerous events. His failure to realize the seriousness of the situation puts both himself and his family in great danger.
Hey, look, it's Robin Williams. Blah, 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 black preacher voice.
In this scene, Peter sees what he thinks is the spirit of Robin Williams and gets overly excited. He starts rambling on and imitating a black preacher's voice, turning what should be a scary moment into something ridiculous and funny. His exaggerated reaction and lack of understanding of the real danger around him just add to the humor. Peter takes a simple situation and makes it way more chaotic than it needs to be.
You know, Peter, we wouldn't have to be messing around with ghosts if you hadn't desecrated those Indian remains.
Brian is frustrated with Peter for causing all the chaos with the ghosts. He reminds Peter that the whole mess started because of his reckless decision to disturb the Native American remains in the backyard. Brian points out that if Peter hadn't been so careless, they wouldn't be dealing with angry spirits now. The comic element comes from the fact that Peter doesn't really take responsibility for his actions and continues to get them into more trouble.
Probably a bad time to mention I'm wearing the skull as an athletic cup.
Peter humorously reveals that he's been using the Native American skull as an athletic cup. This ridiculous statement comes at a tense moment when the family is dealing with the supernatural chaos Peter caused by disturbing the sacred remains. The comedy lies in the absurdity of Peter's actions and his complete disregard for the gravity of the situation. Instead of recognizing the seriousness of the consequences, Peter casually jokes about wearing the skull in a way that makes light of the entire disaster.
Well, Chief, time for you to go back where you came from.
In the episode Death Lives, Peter gets struck by lightning during a golf game and ends up meeting Death himself. As Peter reflects on his life, he gains a fresh perspective and learns an important lesson about appreciating his wife, Lois. The episode mixes humor with heartfelt moments as Peter navigates his near-death experience.
That was close. Huh, that looks dangerous. Somebody's gonna get hurt.
Peter, as usual, narrowly avoids disaster without fully grasping how close he came to real harm. His casual remark, "That was close," acting like it's no big deal. When he notices the obvious threat in front of him, his reaction is more observational than alarmed, as if he's narrating a nature documentary rather than staring danger in the face. Instead of stepping back, he calmly predicts somebody is going to get hurt, while staying exactly where he is, showing his usual mix of cluelessness and laid-back attitude. that somehow makes every situation even funnier.
You again? Oh, Death, please don't take me now.
Peter reacts in his usual dramatic and over-the-top way when faced with death, pleading for his life at the most inconvenient time. In his usual fashion, he acts completely unaware of the absurdity of the situation. Instead of facing death with seriousness, he's frantic and scared, attempting to bargain with it as if he's in control. This mix of fear and denial highlights Peter's tendency to panic in life or death moments, adding his signature humor to an otherwise serious situation.
You're not dying. You're just having a near-death experience.
Peter, always the optimist, reacts to his near-death moments like he's just missed the last piece of pizza. Instead of realizing the severity of the situation, he's confused, looking around and acting like he's just stumbled into an awkward family gathering. He doesn't grasp the danger, trying to joke his way out of it. It's like he's thinking, well, if I survive this, I'm definitely telling this story at the next barbecue.
My God, that's me!
Peter, ever the self-absorbed character, suddenly realizes something that leaves him both surprised and a little too impressed with himself. Instead of taking a moment to reflect or panic, he points at himself, almost in disbelief, like he's discovered a hidden talent. It's as if he's seeing his own reflection for the first time and saying, wow, that's one handsome guy right there. Naturally, Peter's focus shifts away from the danger, proving once again that nothing gets in the way of his self-love. Here, Peter convinces his friends to explore an old haunted asylum to make a horror movie. Things quickly spiral out of control when creepy events make the gang question if the asylum is actually cursed.
If we want to write a scary movie, we need to do it somewhere scary.
Peter's friend suggests that to write a proper scary movie, they need to immerse themselves in a genuinely frightening environment. Peter, always quick to act without thinking, latches onto the idea and immediately decides they should go somewhere ridiculously haunted. It's the perfect setup for Peter's wild plans to lead everyone straight into chaos, proving once again that his determination is only matched by his lack of caution.
Well, I got an idea. Yeah, I like them horror movies where you got a couple of teenagers getting busy in their cab.
Peter, always full of big ideas, starts brainstorming with his usual quirky imagination. He suggests making their scary movie in the classic style of teen horror films, where young couples get into trouble while parked in a car. Of course, Peter's suggestion is less about plot development and more about his offbeat sense of humor, setting the tone for yet another one of his unpredictable plans.
You guys, I'm scared. You remember that movie, The Blob? What if The Blob?
Peter, true to form, starts panicking when the situation gets too intense, openly admitting he's terrified. His imagination runs wild as he jumps to the idea of facing a classic movie monster like the Blob. Instead of coming up with a plan, he suggests the most Peter-like solution, running away, proving once again that bravery isn't exactly his strong suit.
I've been trying to help you.
The hook-handed soldier reveals that he's been trying to assist all along, adding an unexpected twist to the chaos. The hook-handed soldier explains he was trying to help, which turns the situation on its head. His scary appearance and the creepy setting make his words unexpected, showing not everything in the asylum is truly dangerous. This twist lightens the mood and adds humor, keeping with Family Guy's style of making fun of horror cliches.
Oh, God, he's a war hero.
He's dead! What have we done?
We killed an innocent man.
Peter's friends are hit with a wave of guilt and panic after realizing the man they were afraid of was actually a war hero. The moment is full of regret as they process that their actions led to the death of an innocent person. It's a mix of dark humor and shock, highlighting how their wild adventure spiraled out of control in the most unexpected and tragic way.
You're gonna have to kill me first!
Not with my shovel, that's brand new.
Peter and his friends are in a heated argument, both on the brink of attacking each other. Peter, in his usual reckless style, boldly declares he won't back down. However, his friend quickly makes it clear he isn't going to use his brand new shovel for such a confrontation. The tension builds up, showcasing how Peter's impulsive ideas often lead to situations that could have disastrous consequences. This moment is a perfect example of Peter's ability to stir up chaos and nearly get himself and others into serious trouble. It's classic Peter, mixing bravery with a touch of absurdity as he dives headfirst into another chaotic situation. In this interesting episode, Peter's obsession with getting a coupon from a giant chicken leads to another dangerous fight. Despite their past, Peter's reckless decision to engage with the chicken nearly puts him in harm's way, proving once again how his impulsive actions almost get him killed.
There's nothing like a party at someone else's house. You never have to worry about cleaning up the mess.
In this scene, Peter reacts to Meg telling him about a party by mentioning how much he enjoys going to other people's parties. He explains that he likes it because there's no need to worry about cleaning up afterward. This shows Peter's tendency to seek out situations where he benefits without taking responsibility, reflecting his carefree and sometimes irresponsible nature.
You should pick up a chicken strip party pack for all your friends. Here's a coupon.
Peter is given a coupon for a chicken strip party pack meant for all his friends. The coupon offered by a giant chicken adds to the absurdity of the situation, highlighting Peter's tendency to get caught up in ridiculous and often dangerous antics. This leads to another chaotic moment in the episode, showing how Peter's actions frequently get him into trouble.
Oh, yeah, and that nice chicken outside gave me this coupon.
Peter receives a coupon from a giant chicken and tries to use it at the store, but the cashier girl tells him that, "I'm sorry, this has expired." This frustrates Peter, leading him to take extreme action. Instead of letting it go, his anger pushes him to chase down the chicken. Peter's impulsive reaction shows how his need to prove a point or get revenge often leads him into dangerous and chaotic situations, which could have serious consequences for his well-being.
Chicken gave me a bad coupon.
Peter's plan to use the expired coupon turns into a dangerous mess when his anger takes over. After realizing it's no longer valid, he attacks the giant chicken in frustration, and the fight gets out of hand quickly. They end up pushing each other off a bridge onto a truck, causing chaos. The truck driver crashes the vehicle in confusion, and both Peter and the chicken end up hanging from a helicopter. This wild struggle for a simple discount nearly costs Peter his life, showing how his impulsive actions can lead to dangerous situations. Here, Peter tries to save his favorite bar, the Drunken Clam, from being shut down. His over-the-top efforts to protect the place drags his friends and himself into a dangerous situation. This thing highlights how his impulsive actions can easily escalate into life-threatening trouble.
What the hell? Hey, pal, what are you doing? This is our bar.
In this scene, Peter and his friends are shocked to find their favorite bar, the Drunken Clam, closed. When they confront the person in charge, they discover that the bar is no longer theirs. It's now owned by a bank, and the change leaves Peter furious and confused. This moment sets the stage for Peter's wild plan to save the bar, which leads him and his friends into a series of dangerous and risky situations.
That was the start of the dark times. The banks took our bars, our businesses, and then our homes. A change had to be made. A change only one man could make. I am the Wind Maker.
At this moment, Peter reflects on how the community is suffering due to banks taking over their businesses, bars, and homes. His frustration leads him to believe that only he can bring about the necessary change. With this grand sense of purpose, he decides to take action, presenting himself as the one capable of making things right. I am the Wind Maker. Peter's exaggerated thinking leads him to believe that he alone can fix everything, which drives him to take drastic actions. This way of thinking often causes him to come up with risky and extreme plans, showing how his attempts to solve problems can lead to dangerous situations.
We ain't going nowhere. This bar belongs to us.
Peter and his friends firmly believe that the bar they love belongs to them, and they are not going to give it up without a fight. This shows Peter's determination to protect what he cares about, even if his approach is absurd. In his mind, he is standing up for what is right, but his intense commitment to the cause often leads to wild and dangerous consequences, as he is willing to take extreme steps to save the bar, putting himself and others at risk.
I want you to go in there and end this thing.
I'll do my best, sir.
In this scene, Peter's decision to fight for the bar puts everyone in a dangerous situation. The police have surrounded the clam, and the officer orders Joe, one of Peter's friends, to go inside and shoot Peter. This highlights how Peter's stubborn effort to save the bar leads to severe consequences, risking not only his life, but also the lives of his friends. Peter's over-the-top actions often escalate into risky situations where his idea of standing up for what he loves puts everyone in harm's way.
Look, they're sending Joe in. Joe, wait. Put your gun down. There's no point in fighting anymore. We'll leave quietly.
Peter's realization that his actions have led to a dangerous situation for him and his friends hits him hard. Seeing that Joe, his close friend, is being sent in to possibly harm them breaks Peter's spirit. He understands that continuing the fight over the bar is no longer worth it, and that it has gone too far. His decision to surrender shows how his well-intentioned but extreme actions nearly led to the destruction of their friendship and their lives. Peter's plan to save the bar ultimately put everything he valued in danger. In A Shot in the Dark, Peter accidentally shoots Cleveland Jr., creating a controversial situation. His attempts to fix things only makes matters worse, even causing Cleveland's house to burn down, which leads Peter into more dangerous situations.
Hey guys, you better come with me. There's some weird big nose guy hiding in the bushes outside some chick's house.
Peter's life is filled with chaos, and his insane actions seem to only get worse when his friends point out the strange behavior of a big nose guy outside a house. It's just another example of how Peter often causes bigger problems instead of solving them. Despite his attempt to fix things, Peter only seems to make things worse for himself and his friends.
Hold it right there. I'm warning you. Hands where I can see them. Cleveland Jr.?
Peter's reckless and hasty actions reach new heights when he accidentally shoots Cleveland Jr. during a nighttime watch. Thinking he sees a threat, Peter panics and shoots, only to realize he's hurt Cleveland Jr. Instead of carefully considering the situation, Peter reacts impulsively, which leads to a big mess. The humor comes from how ridiculous the whole thing is, as Peter's fear and quick decision-making turn a simple street watch into complete chaos. This shows how Peter's quick decision and lack of thought often put him and those around him in dangerous situations.
Mr. Griffin, you shot me! Oh my God!
Peter is horrified to discover that he has shot Cleveland Jr. after mistaking him for a threat during a nighttime watch. Cleveland Jr., shocked and in pain, exclaims in disbelief that Peter shot him. Peter, panicking and overwhelmed by the realization of what he's done, reacts with genuine horror. The situation quickly turns from a moment of confusion and fear to one of comic absurdity as Peter faces the consequences of his rash actions.
I just dodged a bullet.
Peter expresses relief in a funny way after almost getting into a dangerous situation. When he says, "I just dodged the bullet," he's showing that he often doesn't fully understand the consequences of his nasty actions. Only after the danger is over does he realize how close he came to causing a big problem. This line is humorous because Peter is so casual about almost making a big mistake.
I thought someone was breaking into your house, and I panicked. It was dark.
At this moment, Peter tries to explain himself to Cleveland Jr.'s parents in the hospital. He says that he thought someone was breaking into their house, which made him panic and act without thinking. He also points out that it was dark, which made the situation even more confusing and caused him to make a mistake. This moment shows how Peter often jumps to conclusions without fully understanding what's going on, leading to big problems like accidentally shooting Cleveland Jr.
You're nothing but a worthless bigot.
In the hospital, Cleveland Jr.'s father is very angry at Peter for shooting his son. He calls Peter a worthless bigot, showing just how upset he is about what happened. This moment shows how serious Peter's mistake is, and how his impulsive actions have hurt Cleveland's family. Cleveland's father is furious because Peter's quick reaction caused him to harm his son. Peter is surprised by how mad Cleveland's dad is, which highlights how Peter often doesn't realize the consequences of his actions until it's too late. The humor here comes from Peter not fully understanding the seriousness of what he's done, while Cleveland Jr. reacts in an over-the-top way. In The Man with Two Brians, Peter tries to impress his family by performing a dangerous stunt, but things go horribly wrong. He crashes into the water and almost drowns, narrowly escaping death.
These guys are hilarious. They do so much funny stuff. We should try some of that stuff.
While watching a TV show with his friends, Peter gets an idea. to try out some of the hilarious stunts he sees on the screen. Ignoring the risks, he enthusiastically suggests they should recreate those moments for fun. As expected, Peter's reckless enthusiasm leads to chaos and danger, nearly putting him in harm's way. This scene highlights how Peter's impulsive ideas often result in disastrous situations that almost get him killed, all in the name of trying to have a good time.
I'm Peter Griffin, and this is Shopping Cart, Roof Shopping Cart. Guys.
Inspired by the crazy stunts on TV, Peter boldly announces he's about to do something outrageous. He sets up a dangerous stunt involving a shopping cart, eager to mimic what he saw. In typical Peter fashion, his lack of caution turns the situation into a risky disaster, almost getting him seriously hurt. This moment, once again, shows how his impulsive ideas lead to trouble, all in the name of fun, with no real thought for the consequences.
What does it look like? What do I do? What is that? What is that? I feel something. I'm scared.
After Peter falls off the roof while attempting his dangerous stunt, he's left terrified and confused. His desperate groans show just how serious the situation is. Peter's impulsive ideas and lack of foresight almost cost him his life. In his panic, he repeatedly expresses his fear, realizing just how foolish his actions were. This scene is another clear example of how Peter's impulsive decisions, like trying stunts he sees on TV, almost end up costing him his life.
Okay, I'm Peter Griffin, and I am the greatest American hero. My special power is being somehow memorable after a very short run on TV.
In the scene, Peter is recording a TV show where he proudly declares himself the greatest American hero. His confidence is misplaced as his special power is just being memorable for a short time, much like fleeting TV characters. This moment perfectly captures Peter's tendency to jump into wild ideas without fully understanding the consequences. His eagerness to showcase himself as a hero, even in a comedic and self-aware way, adds to the absurdity of how his ideas often put him in dangerous situations.
Help! Help! I think my arm is broken. I thought I was gonna die.
Peter's reckless idea nearly led him to drown when he found himself in a dangerous situation. He panicked, convinced that he was going to die, and his cries for help were met with urgency from Brian and his friend, who rushed to save him. This is yet another example of how Peter's impulsive actions often land him in life-threatening scenarios. His need for adventure without considering the risks almost cost him his life in this instance, making for a dramatic yet comedic moment. In this episode, Peter avoids reading books by getting hooked on 1980s CDs, thinking it will make him seem cool. His obsession gets out of hand and leads to a dangerous accident, putting him in a coma and showing how his reckless ideas often lead to serious trouble.
I can top that. I ain't ever read a book in my entire life.
At the party, when everyone was discussing books, Peter confidently declared that he had never read a book in his entire life. Instead of impressing the crowd, his statement left them shocked, causing them to leave. This moment highlighted Peter's proud yet clueless attitude, as he saw his lack of reading as something to brag about, not realizing it would make others lose interest in him. This set the stage for his later attempts to fix the situation, which spiraled into chaos.
You guys have 1984?
We've got it on CD.
Okay, boring book. 1984. I am ready for you to be lame and a book and not something unexpected.
At the library, Peter went looking for the book 1984, but discovered they had it on CD instead. He started listening, thinking it would be boring, but he got completely hooked. What started as simple interest turned into full-blown obsession, with Peter taking the story so seriously that he began copying its hellish ideas in real life. His strange behavior worried everyone and eventually caused trouble, showing how Peter's over-the-top reactions can quickly create chaos.
I guess my Van Halen days are over. No, those days are behind me. I made a promise to a pancake.
In this scene, Peter, who had promised his wife to stop his weird behavior, finds himself tempted by a rooster on the road. The rooster challenges him to a race, and Peter, unable to resist, agrees. His impulsive decision leads him into a dangerous situation where his promise to his wife is forgotten. This reflects how Peter's poor judgment and inability to think things through often result in him nearly getting hurt, all for the thrill of the moment. This situation perfectly captures how Peter's need for excitement consistently puts him in harm's way, creating chaos not just for himself, but for those around him.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Griffin, but your husband is in a coma.
The doctor tells Lois that Peter has fallen into a coma after his extreme binge-watching stunt. His over-the-top plan to watch non-stop shows pushed his body past its limits and left him unconscious. This shows how Peter's wild ideas not only risk his safety, but also cause stress for his family, who have to deal with the consequences.
Mrs. Griffin, I have some bad news. Your husband is brain dead. I'm afraid it's time for you to make your choice.
The doctor carefully tells Lois that Peter is brain dead after his binge-watching marathon ended in disaster. He explains that she now has to make some serious decisions about his future. This moment hits hard, as it highlights how Peter's reckless behavior doesn't just endanger him, but also places an emotional burden on his family. Despite Peter's chaotic and carefree ways, this situation forces everyone to face the serious consequences of his impulsive actions, adding a layer of gravity to his usual antics. Peter's poor choices push Meg into making risky decisions that lead her into trouble, putting the whole family in danger. His lack of thinking about what might happen because of his actions nearly causes disaster, showing how Peter's ideas often create life-threatening situations.
That's stupid. You don't know anything about horses and you're in terrible shape.
In this episode, Peter decides to participate in the rodeo. Lois immediately reacts with concern. She points out that it's a bad idea, criticizing Peter's lack of experience with horses and his poor physical condition. Her reaction highlights how reckless Peter's decisions often are, his enthusiasm for doing something risky without considering the consequences, especially when he's completely unprepared.
You know, that's the difference between you and me, Lois. When life comes knocking at the door, you go and hide in the kitchen. I fling the door wide open and I say, Peter Griffin here.
Peter reacts strongly to Lois telling him he can't participate in the rodeo. She points out that he doesn't know anything about horses and is in bad shape. But Peter's response is to challenge her opinion. His desire to prove Lois wrong and show he can do it leads him to participate in the rodeo, despite having no experience or training.
Who says I couldn't be a rodeo star? I got more cowboy blood in me than Billy the Kid.
Peter decides to take on the rodeo challenge after Lois tells him he can't do it. With his typical stubbornness, Peter confidently declares that he has more cowboy blood in him than Billy the Kid, showing his usual overconfidence and determination to prove a point. He believes that just because Lois doubts him, it's the perfect opportunity to prove her wrong.
You know what I am back at the ranch? I'm a breeding bull.
Peter gets on a bull at the rodeo to prove Lois wrong after she doubts his ability to be a rodeo star. When the bull speaks, saying he's a breeding bull at the ranch, it humorously highlights how Peter is out of his league. The bull's casual introduction shows how Peter's idea to take part in the rodeo without any real knowledge of what he's doing is reckless. His overconfidence leads him into a dangerous situation as he literally faces a bull that has much more experience in this dangerous sport. This moment is a perfect example of how Peter's impulsive decisions often lead to life-threatening scenarios, and in this case, it nearly gets him seriously hurt.
I got a house on the Cape. Maybe you come visit. Maybe you call a few days in advance to give me time to get the house clean. Maybe you bring a blazer so we can go to a wider range of restaurants.
Peter's attempt to become a rodeo star goes horribly wrong. When he faces off with the bull, after getting knocked down, the bull humorously gives Peter a list of terms for sparing his life, like visiting his house in the Cape under certain conditions. The bull's calm and straightforward tone contrasts with Peter's impulsive and unprepared approach, showing how Peter's reckless decision leads to a dangerous and absurd situation. His dream of being a cowboy turns into a big mistake, highlighting how his lack of planning almost gets him killed. In a funny and chaotic way, Peter's insane ideas often lead to dangerous situations for his family, whether it's attempting wild stunts or making impulsive decisions. His lack of thinking ahead almost always puts him in harm's way. His actions might be funny, but they constantly show how his lack of awareness nearly gets him and those around him into serious trouble.